With more female entrepreneurs than any other region in the world, women are at the heart of Africa's transformation. Welcome to African Business Stories, the show that amplifies the voices of female entrepreneurs shaping Africa's business landscape. I'm your host, Akego Koye. Here, we explore bold ideas, strategies for scaling, and the realities of building businesses that drive economic development. These stories will provide insights into Africa's business landscape, practical tools for growth, and the inspiration to navigate your own entrepreneurial journey. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and share. On the show today, I chat with Kudzayi Hove, co-founder and CEO of Amayi Foods. Born in Zimbabwe and now based in Nigeria, Kudzayi shares her remarkable journey from private equity to entrepreneurship, driven by her desire to build something meaningful, create mass market products, and unlock more value from African goods. We explore her lessons in navigating co-founder dynamics, overcoming the struggle to scale, and why taking care of yourself as a founder matters. Let's get into it. Hi, Kudzayi. Welcome to African Business Stories.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Akego.
So good to be able to sit down with you today. I know that you were born and raised in Zimbabwe, and I wonder what that was like for you growing up in Zim.
Yeah, it was interesting time. I was born during the war, the liberation struggle. And at a very early age, when I was about 9 months, my parents left the country to go to the UK to study because at the time it was an apartheid system. So really, there were limited spots for Blacks in universities. And then the only professions that were open were teaching and nursing. So if you wanted to do something else, it was really difficult to do that if you stayed. So they left, my brother and I, who was 3 years older, with family members, etc. So my earliest memory was being in the village at my paternal grandparents' home. And I remember it as a happy time as a child, but it was also during the war, right? So I do remember moments where my grandmother put me on her back and was running from soldiers, right? Or I remember a time when my cousin and I were at the homestead by ourselves. I think the adults were in the field, or I'm not sure, but I remember white soldiers approaching the homestead and asking us through translators where the grown-ups were and being absolutely terrified. Yeah, it was intense. Those were my first memories. Like I said, I felt they were happy memories, but at the same time there were these intense moments.
Did you get to go join your parents at some point?
Yes, so when I was 4 years old, my brother and I went to join our parents. And I also remember that journey. I remember being on a plane. I couldn't speak English at the time. My brother could speak a bit of English, and it was back in the days where they would take the boys to the cockpit, but little girls presumably weren't interested in the cockpit. And I remember feeling abandoned, right? Because my brother, who was the only person who could kind of speak the language, was not there, and the only person I knew. And I remember screaming and them trying to calm me down. And then I also remember we stopped somewhere. I don't know if it was Johannesburg or Rome. It was a time when there were sanctions, right? So
Right.
there couldn't be direct flights into Rhodesia at the time. So I do remember spending the night in a hotel with a flight attendant in the
Wow.
same bed as my brother and I. When I tell people that, they're like, what? It's like a crazy, you couldn't
Yeah.
imagine it in these days. But yeah, just arriving in the UK now, I didn't know my dad was there to pick us up with his brothers, and I didn't know them, right? Because they left when I was 9 years old. So I was following this flight attendant out of the airport because she was the only person knew, and then they had to find me and call me. So it was, yeah, it was a lot. I remember just I guess it was significant enough for me to have retained these memories. Yeah.
You meant 9 months old, right? Because I think that's what.
Yes, 9 months old.
9 months.
Sorry, 9 months old.
That's just incredible. So where did you end up going to university?
So I ended up going to university in the US. So shortly after independence, we went back to Zimbabwe as a
Oh, I see.
family, which again was another interesting thing because it was just after independence. We were going to these schools that used to be reserved for white people. And so
Hmm.
now black kids were going there. And so there was a lot of stress on the system. The teachers who were mainly white also were, I think, maybe having their own mental health episodes at the time. Transition was a lot. And it was again an interesting few years as the country was trying to settle into this post-apartheid, post-independence world. Started primary school in the UK, by the
Hmm.
way. I started school in the UK and I left when I was about 7 or 8 years old to go back to when we went back to Zimbabwe. So I did come back to Zimbabwe with this funny little accent, probably from East London, because that's where we lived. So that also made me a little weird to everyone. The black kids were
Yeah.
like, why do you talk like that? The white kids were like, why do you talk? So it was a bit weird. Yeah. So then finished primary school in Zimbabwe and then went to secondary school there. And I didn't actually finish secondary school. I went to the US before the end of my last year. And mainly because I didn't want to do A levels. I just thought they were so constraining. I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life. And I thought it was really unfair to have 16-year-olds decide what they want to do. And I found out about the liberal arts system in the US and how you get time to kind of figure out what you want to do. And I was like, okay, that's the system for me, right? And so that's how I ended up at university there.
So your parents allowed you make that choice.
Yeah, my dad, unfortunately, my mom passed away when I was 16, but
Oh, I
yeah,
see.
my dad was very much, he was okay with it.
Okay, so what was that experience like for you moving to the US?
The move is always something that's very stressful and it impacts someone's life, I think, quite a lot, especially across a move across the world, basically, by yourself at age 18. So it was an interesting time. It took me time to settle down, but I enjoyed the school. This was Clark University in Worcester. I liked the school. I made some very good friends, and it was a very interesting time in the US too, because I remember I arrived around the time that Bill Clinton was campaigning, right, for his first term. And so it was just interesting watching the whole thing unfold, coming from where I came from and the history of the country.
So what did you study at Clark University?
Good question. So initially, I thought I would study. It was like women's studies. I thought I was interested in, then international development. And at some point, I was just like, I don't know what I wanted to do. But the great thing about Clark is that they let you self-design a major. And so that's what I ended up
Okay.
doing. I just cobbled everything together. And I think the major was called the politics of international development or something.
Oh.
That's what I liked about the school in the first place, besides the fact that it had a lot of international students.
So did you do your MBA straight after or did you go work first?
I went home to Zimbabwe and I worked.
Okay.
So I got into banking
Okay.
and it was a bit of a strange twist of fate. But I got into banking. So my first job was a trainee assistant manager in corporate finance of a merchant bank,
Okay.
which then at that point had its the major shareholder was Nemar Rothschild, and now it's Nedbank. But yeah, that was my first job in Zimbabwe. Then I had a couple other jobs before that. And then, I mean, after that, and then went to do my MBA
At Wharton.
at Wharton. Yeah, I went to do my MBA at Wharton.
So what was your career like right after business school?
So after business school, it was straight into private equity for a company which at the time was called Emerging Markets Partnership. And they were
Okay.
an early investor in emerging markets backed by the World Bank, amongst other development finance institutions. It was set up by former World Bank guys. So basically, I joined the Africa Fund. They had a number of funds: Africa, Asia, Latin America,
Okay.
and so I joined the Africa Fund. And then after I joined, a couple of years after I joined, the Africa Fund team spun off and did a buyout. They ended up setting kind of a new company called Emerging Capital Partners.
Oh, I
And
see.
that's, yeah, so that's ECP is the name that most people know in the market in private
Yeah.
equity. Yeah. So
Mm.
I joined ECP straight after graduation. So that was 2003, basically. And I was in the Washington, D.C. office for a while. Then my husband and I'd met my husband at Wharton. um, we
Okay.
decided to move back to Africa, and he was trying to set up a business there, and we figured the soft landing would be to move to Joburg first. So I moved to
Okay.
the ECP Joburg office for a few years, and then we decided to move to Nigeria because the business he was trying to set up was in Nigeria. In all of this, I was the one who was kind of convincing him because at ECP, I started traveling quite a bit across Africa. So it was the first time for me to go to West Africa. I'd never been to West Africa, like to be able to, I'd been to East Africa, parts of it, Southern Africa, but it was for me coming to Nigeria and was the time when MTN was really hot.
Hmm.
And um, seeing what was happening in the economy, I remember going back to the States and saying to my husband, look, there's a lot of stuff happening and we may be missing out on opportunities deciding to stay here. It took a while, but we ended up moving.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
So you're now living in Nigeria. What year are we in when you're in Nigeria?
So we moved here in 2009. I actually moved here before my husband did. So that's what,
Oh, I
16
see.
years in October or
That's
September.
incredible.
And so I came to Nigeria working for AFC. Again, a soft landing, right? Yeah, it was a great experience. I liked what I was doing. Good
Hmm.
people, good work, and it's nice to see it now because infrastructure takes a long time. So some of the projects I was involved in that only were built and completed after I left. But yeah, it was, like I said, it was a very good experience. And it's together with the private equity experience, I think has been really helpful in informing my views of what Amayi Foods should be and our
Hmm.
strategy. But I had for years, even before AFC, I had for years wanted to build something. It wouldn't go away.
Yeah, so you knew you wanted to build something, but you weren't sure what. So how did the
Exactly.
idea of Mai come about?
So my partner Nana and I had known each other since I joined ECP. That was in 2003. She was working there as an analyst. And then I joined after my MBA. So we became friends from that experience. And during that time, she introduced me to Shito sauce, which I'd never tried before, and I loved it. She introduced me and another colleague of ours to it. So we loved it so much, we would have cooking sessions at her place or to make some, right? So that we each had enough for ourselves. But with that, it was one of those things that just kind of stayed with us for years afterwards. And when at some point when I ended up in Nigeria working for AFC, she moved to Nigeria still with ECP.
Okay.
And we were sitting at my dining room table and being like, I was talking about wanting to build a business. And we were like, we've been fighting over Shito and bonding over Shito for years. Why don't we look at doing something related to African food? But there weren't products like your pasta sauce that
Yeah.
give you some level of authenticity, but make it easier and quicker and more affordable to do what you need to do. So that's what we tried to tackle. We were like, look, let's look at seeing if we can do something like this. And
Hmm.
we started messing around with different iterations of a jollof rice kind of mix. And we had taste tests and all that kind of stuff done. And we were looking at the jollof being like a powder mix, and it just wasn't coming out
Okay.
the way that you would want it to. And we had like taste tests with friends and family who are notoriously biased and give you really nice answers. And even they were like, no, it doesn't taste right. So we knew that it wasn't going to work. So we ended up just saying, okay, look, while we try and figure this one out, let's launch the shito, because the thing that they did love was the shito. And it's the thing is, it's a well-known kind of condiment, right, in Ghana, where if you go to a
Yeah.
restaurant, you ask for black pepper, they'll give you shito sauce, and everyone's moms or aunts make their kids the shito to take to boarding school and all that kind of stuff. It's very well known in Ghana, but not known here. But the flavors in it are very West African. You can
Yeah.
take them to any country in West Africa. People will pretty much recognize those flavors. Even actually Southern Africa, there's a bit, although we don't eat that much pepper. So what we realized when people tasted it, they loved it. And they were like, oh, I'm going to have it with my yam or I'm going to do this. And so that's what made us launch it. And that was the beginning of Amai.
How did you guys settle on the name and what does Amayi mean?
Yeah, that was a process. I think we had a lot of names, a lot of options. Like that were just not working. And then one day I suggested Amai. It means mother in Shona, a Zimbabwean language, my language, right? And was acceptable. Because so that's how we settled on it. We liked the meaning, obviously, because we were mothers. Our third partner, Onome, a Nigerian woman, is also, she's a mother of three. Nana from Ghana is a mother of three. Me. At the time, I was a mother of one, but now mother of two. We were like, okay, this works. This kind of works for us.
Your three co-founders, it's been what, like 10 years since you started this business. I'm always very intrigued by co-founder dynamics and relationships. And I wonder what it's been like for three of you over this last 10 years building this.
Yeah. Look, I think it's never an easy ride, whether you're doing it by yourself or with other people, right? Building a business anywhere in the world is never an easy ride, and especially in a place like Nigeria or in Africa and in Nigeria, right? So we've had our ups and downs. That's the truth of the matter. We've been asked by investors, male investors, how do you guys get on? Because women notoriously argue with
Yeah.
each other and we were like rolling our eyes or whatever. But for us, I think the main thing is that it's not consensus based, our decision making. At the end of the day, it's been like the three of us. So if two support, then the other one accepts that it has to go ahead.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. And then the next thing is that we all agree and accept that the decisions we all make are for the good of the business and that the business comes first. So, yeah, it's been, like I said, it's not been easy. We've had our ups and downs. We've been able to, I think, navigate a few, challenges, and come out of it, learn from it and come out of it. But we're still navigating. And we're still
Mhm.
learning because the business changes, right? So new things come up and new challenges come up. And I think that's another, it's not like I can settle back and say, oh, we're all set. Everything
Right.
works like clockwork. But
Yeah.
I think we have developed an understanding of each other and the support that we need to be able to do what we need to do.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's where we are.
Fantastic. So, talking about change, when you started this, when you guys started this business, what were your initial goals? What was your goal in setting up Amayi Foods? And I want to then come to compare it to what the company does today. But just taking the
Yeah.
first part, what was your goal when you started Amayi Foods?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question because I've come to realize now after 10 years of entrepreneurship that there's always this when you read articles about successful entrepreneurs, they're like, this person had a clear vision of what they wanted to do and they executed on it, right?
Yeah,
And they're
yeah.
exactly as an entrepreneur, you're like, why don't I have this? What's wrong with me? And why does my vision keep changing? Which is exactly what it's supposed to do because you adapt to new
Mm,
circumstances, right? You realize something's not working. Oh, I thought that this is what we were going to do. But it's not working, right? I made some assumptions that were not right, were not correct. I need to go back to the drawing board. So look, I think we've always wanted to elevate African food, right? That was our whole thing. Like African food should be sitting at the same level as Chinese food globally, right? Indian food, Italian food, French, whichever one, right? For us, we have so much to offer. And it's a huge continent, so really different kind of dishes, right? From Cape to Cairo or whatever, not
yeah.
to quote an infamous colonialist, but hey. So we always wanted to do that, and that kind of remains the same. But what we realized over time, at the time we launched the Shito sauce, we wanted to have a
Mm.
mass market product. We realized that it was
Right.
important for us to have a mass market product. It's a big population, right? So you want to be able to have a product that appeals to a good number of the population so you can make some money and then to roll out other products on top of it. And I think the way that we looked up at our products is that they should be bases for a number of different types of foods, right?
Mm.
Dishes rather, not foods. You've got like tomato pepper mix that can be a base for jollof, but it can also be a base for stew. Do you know what I mean? It can be different things. So that
Yeah.
has remained the same in what we want in terms of versatility for our
Okay.
products. But what has changed now? The Shito sauce was our major product when we launched. We quickly found out that it was a very rich product to be targeting the open market. We were selling 25 grams of Shito sauce in a sachet for 50 naira, and it sounds cheap. It sounded cheap at the time to lots of people. The only person who was like, that's expensive was a lady who was in marketing at Nestle. She
Okay.
completely understood that 50 naira, what 50 naira meant to a person at the time.
Mm.
And, for sure, 50 naira at that time could buy somebody a whole pack of tomato paste, right? Which they could now use to make jollof rice, a pot of jollof rice,
Mm.
70 grams at the time of tomato paste to make a pot of jollof rice for 4 people. Whereas we were selling a condiment for 25 grams that was single use only, although people did use it for other things.
I
They
see.
used it to season meat and their rice and everything. But it was when you start comparing what people can do, you understand. So the Shito is no longer our main product. We had to retool, we stripped down, we had a pipeline of products. Most of them were like ready to cook or ready to use or ready to eat. We understood after talking to distributors, etc., that our products, the market was not ready for that, right? What the market wanted was
Right.
a product that they could cut down the time and cost of preparing a meal, but allowing their own customization.
Right.
So that changed, right? So our major products right now are tomato paste and tomato pepper paste, right? Which we sell across the country, right? 29 states and mostly in the traditional markets, right? At the time, we were
Mm.
in mostly what they call the modern trade. So the supermarkets like ShopRite and Spar were the only ones just right who were taking our
Mm.
products. And they really account for less than 10% of retail volumes in the country. It
Wow.
was very limiting for us, and we couldn't break through to the open markets, which accounts for 90% of the retail volume. So that has changed. And then also, our view has broadened beyond elevating African food. I think what we came to understand is that in order for us to do anything successfully in this market or any other African market, right? First of all, because we depend so much on local ingredients, there has to be some kind of partnership with farmers, with aggregators to make it work, and a partnership that is long term and sustainable. So we don't want at the end of every season to be running like the new season to be running after new farmers, etc. So that's what we realized.
Yeah.
And we realized it not as a way of, oh, we need to make an impact, but that's actually initially we were like, that's kind of the only way we make money out of this long term, right? If there's
Mhm.
some sort of a
Yeah.
win-win, right? And then, by the way, oh yeah, if we structure it, it has this great impact on the communities, right? That can actually change people's lives and create real prosperity. And so that was another thing that's really evolved for us. It's become our understanding of it and how we want to do it has really evolved versus just, okay, we're buying from small scale farmers, right? So that kind
Yeah.
of also has shifted. And then also connected to that was the need for us to not just elevate African food, but to now claim more value from African products. I mean, if you
Right.
look at any cosmetic product in the US, right, odds are it's got cocoa butter in it or shea butter, right, which comes from Africa.
Sure.
And we are
Hmm.
selling this unprocessed, right? And somebody else is processing and making the money. So for me, for us, we really felt that, look, at the end of the day, we have got to, if we're setting up sort of the infrastructure to buy inputs for our retail products, right, like the tomato from small scale farmers, then why not now build on that to actually process commodities, right, that we can now sell for greater value on the international market. So just to give you an example, sesame seed.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, you get about an 8% margin on raw sesame seed, right? Unprocessed
Mhm.
sesame seed. But if you now process to cold pressed sesame oil, which is in great demand in China, Japan, other parts of
Hmm.
Asia, that margin increases to 40%. We're really leaving a lot of value on the table as Africans. I think that's also a huge part of the strategy that's changed for us as Amayi.
This is so interesting, very insightful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kudzayi. So, in terms
Sure.
of your goal to reach the mass market, so you were sharing earlier and you said how when you initially started, you were in the grocery stores and all the shops. So, where are your
Yeah.
products sold today?
Yeah, we've actually been able to break into the mass market.
Okay.
So 99% of our sales are basically into the traditional market today.
So, in terms of manufacturing, where are you manufacturing and what has that process been like for you guys at Amayi Foods?
Yeah, so we are in Ikeja, in Lagos. And
Okay.
so we manufacture from here. I think, look, it was a very steep learning curve for us um, over the years. It's
Mm.
been a very steep learning curve. I think the last few years, we've been able to assemble the right team and with the right kind of approach, right kind of attitude. And that has really helped us significantly. It's taken some time, and I think as an entrepreneur, I sometimes I look back, I blame myself at times, right? In the first few years, we would spend quite a lot of time on culture and trying to build a company environment that people enjoyed working in. It's we appreciate team members, right? But then a few years into it, it became about firefighting, right? And survival, and much less focused on culture. But in the last few years, we've been able, fortunately, to focus more on that. And not just focus on creating the culture, but also the kind of person who fits into this culture.
So today you have five products and you're distributing across, I think you said 29 states in Nigeria. What was that process like for you in scaling your distribution network? And are there any key lessons that you've learned in the process of scaling across Nigeria?
Yeah, look, we learned a lot of hard lessons, I think. I think we started trying to scale up too quickly, as in going into too many places at once. And
Mm.
so that really caused problems for us initially. We're now being a bit more strategic about it. So for each kind of area, when we say 29 states, you can have somebody in Kano, but dealing with several states. When we say 29 states, right, we're not saying that we have one distributor in each and every one of those states, but we could have somebody in Kano covering several states, if you see
Hmm.
what I'm saying. So we've been a lot more strategic about it. So that's been very helpful. We had to learn lessons in quality and seeing our product out there because tomato paste is it's a fragile product in many ways, but trying to make distributors understand how you keep it, you know what I mean, the
Hmm.
conditions that you keep it in, etc. So yeah, there've been quite a few hard lessons. I think for us the main issue now, which has been our main issue for a while, is capacity to be able to actually scale up further. We've struggled with that for a few years which is why we're now looking at this acquisition as an opportunity to address that.
When you guys started this business, did you leave your job straight away, or was this a side project for a while before you dived in?
Yeah, it was a bit of for me, it was a bit of a side project. We were working on it before I left AFC in the sense that we were developing the products and doing the taste tests. But it was after I left AFC at the end of 2013 that I left my job. Nana and Oname did not. But I left. I had left anyway because I had this need to build something. So I had taken the decision that I was going to leave and focus on the business. I had my second daughter in 2014. And then it was towards the end of that year that we started again really working on it. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I did leave my job. It was a big deal like that.
How did you guys raise the initial capital to start the business?
We funded it ourselves initially from our own savings. We were able to do quite a lot until about 2018. That was the first time we got third party funding in at the time. Yeah, it was about we funded it for about 2 to 3 years for ourselves.
Okay. And what has fundraising been like?
Look, it's been tough. Nigeria is tough, although it shouldn't be as tough as other places because of the population. But it has been tough. Both Nana and I are from private equity backgrounds, and we thought it would be a lot easier. We ended up realizing that it's pretty hard, especially if you're targeting people who don't understand FMCG, you know what I'm saying, and how the build up, etc. So it was tough just getting that initial money in, and it's been tough raising in general, I think. What I think has helped us is when we look at, for example, at this acquisition of this company that we're trying to do, has been able to attract interest of larger players because it is a larger ticket size. Do you know what I mean? Versus a smaller play like Amayi Foods. So that has been able to attract attention. But yeah, I think it's just tough all around. We were at some point competing with tech. If you remember the tech bubble,
Yeah,
nobody wanted
yeah.
to know about you unless you were tech related.
Unless you're tech
Um,
enabled.
yeah, tech enabled. And then a friend was saying that who owned like a retail business was saying the problem with our businesses is that people think they understand it, right? So they want to go through the numbers and all sorts of things. But when it comes to tech, they don't really understand it. They just want to follow the bandwagon. We were really struggling with that, competing against that. But look, at the end of the day, people still need to eat. That's our view.
So, in terms of your value chain and the local farmers that you source produce from, what has it been like building that network and sustaining it? Because I think I read that they're all the way in, most of your supplies are in northern Nigeria.
So we have two sets of suppliers, some in the southwest, right?
Okay.
And we
Okay.
initially were in contact with them, put in contact with them by GIZ, the German development finance institution, under a program called the Nigerian International Competitiveness Program. So they are
Mm.
the implementation partner. So they're the ones who helped us, held our hands, and put us in touch with these farmers in the Southwest. We still have relationships with those farmers, so we continue with that. The northern farmers, it's actually been through aggregators, and that's what we're building out now is
Okay.
now to have a direct link with those farmers so that we know what we're growing. We can, at least we can have them grow what we need to our specifications and the quantities that we require, right? So that's what we're presently building out right now. And
Mm.
ostensibly, that infrastructure is for us, for the inputs that we need for our products. But this is where the infrastructure play comes to me, in my mind. Whatever we're building out can also handle other commodities, right? So we're not just looking at a single commodity cycle, right? And our own inputs. But if you can dry tomatoes, you can dry chilies, you can dry garlic, ginger, you can dry hibiscus, right? They're just different. For me, I think the main thing is to make your infrastructure as, first of all, modular as possible and make it multi-use to be able to sweat out as much as you can from it.
Right. So, how do you keep your prices low or reasonable enough for the mass market?
Yeah, it's been a struggle. I think for us, the import substitution,
Mm.
sourcing our inputs locally has been what has helped us. That has enabled us to basically make products that are affordable but also profitable for us.
Are you able to talk to us a bit about this planned acquisition? You've mentioned it twice.
I know. Yes, I can. I can't mention any names, but I can
Okay.
mention the rationale for it.
Okay.
But yeah, look, we initially thought we were going to scale up organically, so raise money, build our own factory from scratch, etc. But a few years ago, we started talking to a company about contract manufacturing for us. And then those talks evolved into a potential acquisition. The company itself does similar products to ours plus additional products. So it makes sense in that way that we have
Mm.
scale for existing products, but we also get new products, which helps us to diversify. It has a really good management team,
Okay.
which we would have had to look for those kinds of people anyway. We're excited about that. And yeah, we for us it kills several birds with, you know, uh,
Yeah.
just a few stones. It makes perfect sense for us. We know enough about manufacturing in Nigeria now that we know that you don't just build a new factory and then flip the switch and everything is working, right? It takes a
Mm.
while to optimize a factory. So for us, we like the idea that this factory is already in existence. They do, you know what I mean? They do what we do, they do it at a bigger scale. And then this now creates the platform for us to do a number of different things. When I mentioned about the commodity processing, but we're
Yeah.
also very much interested in nutrition commodities, which are I don't know if the ready to use therapeutic foods
Mm.
that are used to treat children experiencing severe
Yes.
acute malnutrition.
Malnutrition. Mm.
Mm. So that's one area that we very much want to be in. And we're looking at different parts of the value chain, but they all fit in very nicely with the commodity processing that we're looking at doing. And then also this acquisition, because the target company can actually manufacture the nutrition commodities.
Is this still in Nigeria?
Still in Nigeria. For us, the other opportunity is with the Naira devaluation. Nigerian products are extremely competitive right now.
Fantastic.
So we want to be able to take advantage of that too. So that is again, the target company has products that can be exported into the region. If we have scale as a Mai, can do the same. But yeah, it's something that we're very excited about.
So, what has raising money for this acquisition been like?
So this, as I've said, it's attracted more attention because it's a bigger ticket size, right?
Yeah.
It's your players like private equity companies, etc., are a lot more interested in something that's $10 million or $20 million versus 500,000 or 1 million, right? So it's helped us in that sense that our private equity background has also obviously helped us a lot
Mm.
in structuring of it. And also, look, it all comes back full circle. The relationships that we've built over the years,
Mm.
with other players in the private equity big industry in Africa. Nana and I are amongst the first women to be doing it in Africa. And so, yeah, it's actually really tapping into our whole network that kind of has helped us. And it's the network that we have built. These are people who understand these kinds of transactions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not been easy. I wouldn't say it's a walk in the park, but it's moving, it's progressing.
Hmm, hmm. So, based on your experience, your previous experience in PE, and then just building this business over the last 10 years, what kind of investment do you think that we need to support the growth of the agricultural value chain across the continent?
Yeah. Look, it's for me, we can talk in broad generalities like, oh, infrastructure, right? But the thing is, I think when we do that, we can make the problem so big, it's really difficult to grapple with. My view, and maybe it is but more of an infrastructure view, is to make make investments as modular as possible. So if
Mm.
you're going to be talking about storage, right, it should be storage, which is obviously, we know that lack of storage is a huge problem in terms of post-harvest losses, right?
Yeah.
But make it storage that can be utilized for multiple commodities, right? Over different seasons, right? Different seasons, yeah. And then it has to be a combination. You invest in something that has a combination of big off takers to provide like base volumes, but you can also have small farmers having access to it, right? To me, that's the kind of investment that would be good for storage, for some processing. But then there's some things you can't run away from. Kano
Yeah.
Lagos Railway is that is like a no-brainer, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, with that, unless it's given as a concession to a private long-term concession, and that private player knows they've got guaranteed volumes from people, which shouldn't be difficult, it's not going to work. But that in and of itself would reduce so much of the headache of transportation. So those are some of the areas that I would think that people should invest in. Again, companies like ourselves, I would say, obviously, people should invest in us,
Yeah.
and because that's where kind of the real change is happening, right? And that's also where the real returns can happen too. It's
Mm.
just that it is a high touch investment. You're not sitting down and saying, I'm going to contribute corporate governance, which was what we used to love saying in private equity. We'll bring corporate governance to the table. It's a lot more than that. But yeah, for me, they're the individual investments, and then there's shared infrastructure that can be
Mm.
done on storage, logistics, and there's some things just like the railway that just needs to be dealt with, and that's
Right.
probably a PPP partnership.
And I'm really excited about your acquisition. Really
Mhm.
excited to see how that goes. And just wondering where you see the company in the next 5 to 7 years. So what's next for Amayi?
So if we do the acquisition successfully, then that will lead us to eventually become probably the largest African female founded player, right? In the FMCG industry, food related in Nigeria, right? So that would be very exciting for us, but obviously we're not doing it just for that. For us, it's the anchor asset in the broader strategy, which I've mentioned as we go along. But for me, 5 years from now, my has got a strong FMCG platform, right? Having started off with this acquisition, but it's possible for us to roll up additional companies. I'd like that we'd be basically geographically diversified, right? So not just Nigeria makes sense in West Africa because it has got the economies of scale, right? That
Yeah.
many other countries don't have. We could roll up other companies, but we have a solid FMCG business with brands that occupy number one and two
Yeah.
in the markets, whatever market they are operating in. We have built out the nutrition commodities business, and we're a supplier both locally and regionally and internationally, which ties into what UNICEF believes Nigeria should be doing, not just supplying for itself, but also being a global supplier. And then we have got a solid commodity processing business, which enables us to, we've picked a number of key commodities. We have
Mm.
long-term arrange agreements with buyers in different parts of the world. We are known as a MI for our quality and consistency when it comes to producing those inputs. So that's where I see it. In 5 years' time, I hope we plan to be $100 million company, 5 to 7 years' time.
Fantastic.
That's the goal. Yeah.
There's clearly more clarity than you had when you started 10 years ago.
Yes.
So, yeah.
A lot more. A lot more.
That's fantastic. I really do wish you all the best with that. In wrapping up, I tend to ask my guests two questions. And one
Mhm,
is a reflection and one is for advice. So in terms of reflecting, just looking back
mhm.
at all you have built over the last 10 years with your co-founders, I wonder what you would say if I asked you what your proudest moment so far has been. What would you say that is?
Gosh, it's hard. I think it's probably a tie between our products, when our products roll, like the roll off the line, and we've made this really good quality product that we have as founders ourselves. Our view is that we don't sell products that we don't use in our own homes, right? We wouldn't give you products that we wouldn't give our own children. So for
Right.
me, there's a level of pride in that, but there's also a real level of pride in the team. It's just, for me, I think it's something that's, yeah, it's, I didn't think it was possible because people, finding the right people, especially in a place like Nigeria, is really so difficult. So I'm enormously proud of the team that we've been able to build. I'm proud that we've built something, right?
Yeah.
Because that is what I wanted to do at the end of the day. The fact that
Yeah.
I have team members whose outlook has changed because of their involvement in Amayi Foods, and if they go and work somewhere else, I think that they will continue to grow. That is also to me building in a way. But yeah,
In terms of advice, what advice would you give to other women who are building and scaling businesses in Africa?
yeah, especially African women, we think that we can do it all the time. I think we're raised to get on with it. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know how to describe it. And I think that is great, gives us a lot of energy and determination, tenacity and resilience. But at the same time, I think it's important for us to always remember that person inside and what you need to, if you need to regroup, right? You need to rest, you need to refresh. There are many things that you have to recognize your needs and you have to take care
Yeah.
of those needs for you to be able to actually continue to operate. And the thing is, it sounds like a bit of a luxury. And I think for many female entrepreneurs, it is, because it's life, it's a matter of life and death, or like it's their livelihoods, right? But whatever small thing you can do to take care of yourself, I think is really important. This is a job that affects wealthy men. Being a founder and an entrepreneur, right? You hear all sorts of things about mental health issues there. When you now think of your average African woman entrepreneur, right, who is not sitting necessarily at the top of the socioeconomic ladder, right? We have to let's acknowledge that and do what we can to take care of ourselves while we build.
Thank you so much. Take care of yourself while you build. I like that. So, where can people find Amayi food products and how can they engage with your brand?
Yeah, so we are mainly just distributing in the open markets in
Okay.
across Nigeria. So it would really be at an open market near you. We do have some retail presence at shops like Ebano and Just Right in Lagos, Spa in particular. But if people do want to engage, I encourage them to check out our social media, Amayi Foods _NG. That's on Instagram, Facebook, and X, and then also our website, www.amayifoods.com. And you can find contact details there. We also have a LinkedIn page, Amayi Foods. So you can find contact details there if you want to place an order for something. And yeah, that's probably the easiest way. But besides the going to the local market, or if you want to know which local market, it's
Right.
available, the products are available at.
Thank you so much, Kudzayi. This has been a great conversation.
Oh, no, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. If you're not already subscribed, please do so on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to leave us a review so we know how we're doing. I'm Akego Okoye, and you have been listening to African Business Stories.